I want to talk to you about, teach you a little bit about how to lay out your elements on a page and dealing with CSS. So in order to help you understand this, I've decided to use an analogy. Let's take your typical dresser, the dresser that you put your clothes in, okay? Dresser that looks like this. Now, in a dresser, you've got the top of your dresser, you've got the drawers that your dressers go, that your clothes go in, and then of course you've got your feet, right? Well, we're going to create an HTML document pretty much the same way, and we're going to build pretty much this. Okay, now ours is going to be black and simple, just for the cases of this. All right. So first of all, what we're going to do is in our HTML document is we're going to call a section, make a section called the dresser. Now, if you remember, a section is a part of the site that can stand alone. So in a whole grand scheme of things, in your bedroom being the whole HTML page, there's one element in your bedroom, the dresser, which we're going to call it a section. Alright? So basically, in my whole HTML, I'm going to start off with a section. Now just for illustration purposes, I'm actually going to give them IDs so that you know what we're dealing with. Okay? Section, the dresser. Now this is my whole dresser right here. Okay? Now this happens to be 500 pixels by 500 pixels wide. So for the sake of the video, I've made the dresser box 500 pixels by 500 pixels as well, which of course you can see here. Here's our document. Here's our dresser. It's actually, excuse me, it's 500 by 300. So this is our whole box for the dresser. Okay? Now let's go back and look at our dresser. We've got different elements. Well, first of all, we've got the top of our dresser. Now, although you can't really see the top of the dresser in this picture, yes, we've got the frame, but ignore the frame. Pretend like this frame of the dresser is actually the little dotted line here. But you can't really see the top, but there's the top of the dresser. And on the top of the dresser you may have a lamp, or books or whatever, okay? So let's count the top of our dresser as a piece first. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to call that the header. And of course I'm going to give it an ID for the reference. Oops. Okay. Now the next part of our dresser is we have the drawers. There are 6 drawers. Now each of these drawers, inside each drawer has different stuff, right? Usually you put clothes. You have socks in one drawer, you have jeans in one drawer, you have a shirt in one drawer, you may have sweaters in one drawer. And technically, if you pull out the drawers, each drawer tells a story by itself. Each drawer has its own collection of stuff. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to call these drawers articles in our cases. Because remember, articles, if we were to take an article and make it into an HTML page by itself, it would make sense. One dresser with these clothes in it has its own whole story in it. So we're going to call each drawer an article. So inside of here, I'm actually going to make 6 different articles. And with a little bit of cut and paste, copy and paste, here's my 6 drawers, right? Now then also we have the bottom where the feet of our dresser is. Now granted, this, if you want to get picky, this looks like it's one solid foot, but we're going to pretend like there's a leg here, a leg back there, a leg right here, and a leg back there. So there's 4 feet inside the footer. So this whole bottom part we're actually going to call our footer. So let's make a footer section. We're going to call it dresser feet. Now, inside the dresser feet, of course, we've got 4 different blocks. They are the different feet. Now, we're not going to call them an article because they're just little elements. They're not anything important. They can't stand really by themselves. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to make div boxes. And you'll see why we're doing div boxes in just a second. So I'm doing div for 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, looking at our code right here, we've got the top of our dresser, we've got our drawers, we've got the feet where the dressers are. But there's a problem here. Although our drawers are sitting inside the whole box, we really spliced this up. Here's the top and here's the footer. So we need something for the drawers to sit in. And see this section that's got these cross beams in them. Well, we're going to call that the body of our dresser because they've got to sit inside of something. So I'm actually going to wrap these articles here. Whoops, tab them out a little bit. And I'm actually going to put, yes, another section. Oops, I want to put that down at the bottom. Called dresser body. Now notice you can have sections inside of sections. That's not a problem. So section, dresser, body, articles, and then of course here's our footer. Now there's nothing in the top, but let's just say that the top happened to have stuff on it, okay? Now, with our code laid out as it was, this is kind of what happens. Now I've done a little bit of styling so you can see things. I'm going to have to take off the borders when we actually get ready to configure this because the borders will throw things off just a little bit and make it a little bit more complicated with our tutorial. We can explain about the borders and how they affect your width and padding at a later time. But as you can see, these light tan colored boxes are the drawers. Drawer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this darker brown area is actually the drawer body where the drawers are supposed to go. There's a small section you can barely see. There's a dotted line. That's where my feet are supposed to be for this thing, okay? So here's the problem. These drawers, they're just stacked in there. Remember our code that we had set up a second ago? They're just articles listed there, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to manipulate these articles using some CSS in order to make them float where they need to, okay? Now I've actually jumped over here and added the drawer names inside each of our drawers just so you can kind of know what they look like, and I've colored them just a little bit different so you can see how they lay out. So drawer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay? Now, here's the problem. They're all stacked on top of each other because literally in the code, they're all stacked on top of each other. Everything is listed as, you can have everything listed as either a display block or inline. Everything is a block, so think of it as a block of wood. These drawers are just blocks of wood. They're stacked on top of each other. But we kind of want to lay them in line, but two beside each other, okay? First of all, let's look at our CSS so that we can understand where everything is, and then we'll get down to our footer section in just a minute. So in our CSS, I've got some basic things set up, okay? My entire dresser is 500 by 300. Now I've added a border there just so that you can see just barely the little dotted border so you can see that this is our main container that we're in, okay? Then our dresser top. Because our dresser top is inside our section called the header, I can actually say width 100%, meaning, because the top of your dresser is not going to go only part of the way, it's going to go all the way across, the full 500 pixels wide, okay? Now I gave it a height of 30 pixels just so it gives it a little bit of depth. See, it looks like it's the top, okay? And of course I colored it so that we knew what it was, and I gave it a little bit of a border so we can actually depict that it is a dresser top, okay? Now our dresser body, of course, which is the intersection which the drawers go in, of course that dresser body goes width 100%, right? And then the height, each dresser, basically I did 210 pixels, okay? Them in between, because my footer is 70 pixels tall and my dresser top is 30 pixels tall, so I subtracted that from 300 and I have 210 left, which, excuse me, my footer is 60 pixels tall, which leaves 70 pixels per, because I want to go 3, I want to do 3 and 3, right? Look at this, 3, and then we want 4, 5, 6 to be right here beside it, so we want 3 and 3. Take that 210 pixels in the middle and divide it by 3, so I get 70, alright? So there's my article. Now here's what's interesting. All these others I've called directly with an ID tag. Now giving something an ID tag, you can call it exactly as is. But I wanted to go inside dresser body and I wanted to call every single article. Now I could have done it one of two ways. Class tags work similar. If you give something a class equals and then name it something, everything with class equals blue, for example. Let's just say I call it my blue or something. Class equals some name. Everything with that name you can call in the CSS file and it'll have the same attributes. Well, I'm actually just calling the articles inside of this. So I put dresser body space article. Now we'll get more into CSS stuff a little bit later on. Now, I did not have to call drawer 1, drawer 2, drawer 3, drawer 4, drawer 5 individually because they all share the same, they're all articles. That's why I did dresser body article. And I set them all 70 pixels. Okay, so setting this height affects all 6 of my drawers. Okay, then my dresser feet, the container I want for my dresser feet, once again 100 pixels, 100% wide, pixels 60% tall. Alright, now let's look at our problem here. Problem is, these things automatically span 100% of the container that they're in. Now remember, the container is set to 100%, so these will automatically span 100% as well, but we don't want them 100%. We want to divide this in half, right? So we're going to go halfway through. So what I'm going to do is, because each of them are going to be exactly half, I'm going to put a width attribute of 50%. Okay, makes sense? 50%, 50% is 100%. Let's take a look at what happens when I do this. Boom, they're exactly half. But wait a minute, how come these did not go all the way up here over the other side? Because they're still in stack mode. Now, there's a problem. Let me show you what happens. As I said, you've got block mode and you've got inline mode. These are all blocks and they're all basically stacked on top of each other. If I do display inline, inline shrinks the container down to only its content. And because I have the word drawer 5 in here, because I have, it's not drawer 5, but drawer and then some number, it's only going to fit to that text, and that's it. Okay? Well, we don't want to do that. We want to actually force these to still be a block, but we want them to sit side by side. The other way to do that is floating it left. You got float left and you have float right. If you float something left, it'll of course stay to the left of its bounding container, which is this brown box, or float something right, which will stay to the right side of this container. Now, being that they're 50%, they should stack left and right. So let's add our float left. The other beauty of these things with a float left is that it will automatically wrap. Once it fills the container, it will wrap down to the next line, just like so. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? Now, what about those lines in between that we saw in our original picture? These lines right here. Well, we're actually going to call that margins. There's a difference between a padding and a margin. Okay? A padding is space inside, basically a pad. If you're in a padded room, you've got pad, which provides thickness between you and the outside world, right? So if there's a padding, then if we set a padding, then that basically means our stuff inside cannot go into that padded region. It's got to stay in the middle. Well, we're not doing that. We're actually doing outside. All right. Now here's the tricky part. This is going to be more complicated than to show in this video. But let's say that's a 5 pixel margin on the outside. But notice how really, if you take this box by itself, you have a bottom margin and a right margin, but you don't have anything on the left. Let's ignore this outer frame. Okay, let's pretend the outer frame is my bounding box already. But for this, you got a right margin and a bottom margin. Well, this box has a left margin and a right and a bottom margin, but it shares that margin in the middle. Well, if they all look the same. So let's just say this space is 5 pixels. Okay, I can't say that this one here put a right margin of 5 pixels and then take this one and put a left margin of 5 pixels, because what would happen is you'd have 2 of these, 5 and 5, so you'd have a 10 pixel gap right there, and that's not what we want to do. So we actually split it in half. So 2.5, 2.5, and you're like, well, I can't do 2.5. So yeah, that does get kind of tricky. We'll actually discuss those later. And of course, being that these have a bottom margin, but then these have a top margin. So what do you do on these? And it gets kind of complicated, but we're not going to worry about that. We're actually just going to have them all stacked nice and neat, snug, right next to each other. You're not going to see a margin in between. Okay, so now let's look at our footer. Our footer is this part right down here. Now remember, we're going to have 4 legs. Now, in order to make this look 3D,